Welcome to Meet the Candidates. I'm Kate O'Donnell, and I am here today with Danielle Welch, running for the U.S. House of Representatives in New York's 3rd Congressional District on Tuesday in June 23rd in the upcoming primary. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you, and we'll get right into it.
Sounds good.
So you've spent more than a decade as a public defender working in the Legal Aid Society's decarceration project. How has that experience shaped your understanding of the challenges facing working families? And how would it influence your priorities in Congress?
That is a great question. Thank you for asking. So I actually started out in trial. I was a trial-level public defender for about 6 years, and then I entered our special litigation unit focusing primarily on pretrial detention. So most of my work today is actually habeas litigation, which is unfortunately an incredibly timely specialty. It has impacted my view of the world in general, to be very honest with you. I got into the work because I myself grew up in a socioeconomically disadvantaged community, and I'm the first in my family to attend college. And when I was able to attend both undergraduate and law school on full tuition scholarships, I really wanted to go into public service immediately, which my family thankfully supported, despite turning down an absurd amount of money. And I think that it is some of the best preparation that you could possibly have for going into politics, because when you work in public defense, whether it's at the trial level or in more of an impact litigation role, you are so connected to the communities that are most in need of support and resources. And unfortunately, because of the way that our system works, those are some of the least empowered people in the eyes of politicians. They cannot make huge donations at campaign time. They can't introduce them to well-connected individuals that can help them. But ultimately, they are the ones that we most need to be serving. And so one area that I think has really been relevant is immigration. So I have been a public defender in Queens for my entire career as well, which is, of course, the world's borough. And we speak several languages in court, and we get people from all over the world, which is an incredible thing. And in meeting people from these various backgrounds, you encounter people in a wide range of situations, both in life and specifically within the immigration process. And so one area that I very strongly disagree with Representative Swazi is asylum. And that is because he doesn't have any policy on his website. But if you look at his past actions, he has written letters to the president in the past saying, our asylum system is broken. There are people who are being coached and they're overstating their fear. And he looks at the denial rate as proof that there is fraud. I have sat with many people going through the asylum process, both people who have been granted asylum and people that are awaiting a determination. And their trauma is real. The fear that they are fleeing is real. And I look at that same rate and I see a system where you are not guaranteed a lawyer. There are people representing themselves. We've seen cases where toddlers are representing themselves. And I have a daughter about to turn 3. She's really bright, but she couldn't do it. It's just a really absurd system. And then you couple that with the fact that they're also frequently, navigating the system without legal counsel in a language that's not their first language. And you have judges that are beholden to the administration. And we've seen immigration judges being retaliated against for trying to do the right thing. And so I just do not understand, as both an attorney and just a human, how you can look at those numbers and see that denial rate and reach the conclusion, everyone is defrauding us when there are all of these things stacked against us. And so I think that it's one area where my experience as a public defender has really given me an appreciation for the solutions that are actually necessary. And there's this very clear distinction, because what we need is not a higher standard for credible fear, as Representative Swazi has pushed for. What we need is a better system with better laws and a right to counsel for people who are facing repercussions that are every bit as serious as prison. You know, we only guarantee right to counsel if you're facing jail time, and it's great that we do that. But when you're looking at the potential to be, removed back to a country where you have a very real reason to believe that you or your family could be killed, those stakes are just as high.
And so your campaign really centers on combating this corruption around protecting civil liberties. So what do you see as the biggest threat to democratic accountability today? What specific actions do you think you would take in Congress to address them when you got there?
Sure. I think that this moment in our history has really revealed how weak our democratic institutions are in this country if everybody involved is not taking their role seriously. I think it's hard to say that anybody but Donald Trump is the biggest threat, but Congress's inaction is certainly up there. I think that we have a system of government where the branches are supposed to serve as checks on each other, and instead what we're seeing is both a Congress and a Supreme Court that is all too willing to just completely capitulate to an executive who is, I think any rational person would agree, is pursuing a very authoritarian style of governing that we have not seen in America. And so there are a lot of ideas that I have for pushing back on this. I think that one of the most urgent is reforming the Supreme Court, because what we are seeing is just rejection after rejection from the Supreme Court of even the attempts to rein in the executive branch. And unlike a lot of other areas that would require constitutional amendments, for example, the federal court system is something where Congress actually has a lot of power. There is very little in our Constitution that requires the Supreme Court to look any particular way. And so you hear ideas about expanding the court, which is something that I certainly think we should consider. But it can actually be broader than that. There are a lot of ideas floating around. There was a really good suggestion I want to say it was published in Liberal Currents. It's on my website because I like to credit people when they have good ideas. The suggestion there is that you treat two problems at once. You address the chronic understaffing of the lower courts, which have, these backlogs. They don't have enough judges. They don't have enough courts, and people are waiting far too long for justice. And so you start by expanding those. We double the district courts. We double the circuit courts. Everything is moving more efficiently. We fund it properly. And then we move away from a permanent Supreme Court and move to a system where cases decided at the Supreme Court level are decided by a panel of judges randomly chosen from this now doubled judiciary. And it solves two long-term problems. We are not then in a constant state of each party expanding the court until there's, 30 people sitting in D.C. permanently. And it also addresses the broader problems of inefficiencies within the system, and it makes it impossible to, I'm not accusing anybody of specific misconduct here, but it makes it impossible to judge or to bribe the bench. Because if you don't know which judges are going to be hearing your cases, you don't know who to gift a, luxury vacation to that they don't have to disclose because we don't have binding ethical rules. And so I think that is one of the most urgent reforms we need to take, but I think that there are a lot of other anti-corruption measures that need to be in place. I think that we need to actually enforce the rules about the president not being able to enrich himself. We need anti-nepotism policies. It is absurd that we are sending the president's son-in-laws to negotiate on behalf of the country. They were never elected. It's not clear why they have that power. And it's just really absurd in a democracy that is the situation that we are allowing. And then, frankly, a lot of the corruption is happening at the congressional level. We have congressional representatives who are allowed to trade stocks. And you'd love to believe that's not impacting them. But as an easy example, we learned that Tom Suozzi was holding stock in Palantir at the time that he voted for more DHS funding. And he was one of only 7 Democrats to vote that way. It was 2 weeks after a woman had been murdered in the streets of Minneapolis. And it's really hard not to feel like holding thousands of dollars worth of this contractor that's going to benefit from this very funding is not compromised by that. So I would support a ban on congressional stock trading. I would also support a lifetime ban on lobbying for members of Congress. And while I personally only have like 4 stocks or so at the moment, if I were elected, I would sell them, because I think that even if you're the rare person who can fully separate from that influence, it's an appearance problem. I think that your constituents deserve to know that you are representing them, not your stock portfolio, not yourself, not any campaign donors. We really need to get money out of politics.
So you're running in a district that has recently been one of the most closely watched congressional battlegrounds in New York, as you know. Why do you believe your progressive message is the right fit for voters in New York 3?
Sure. I actually have not been calling my platform progressive. A lot of people have been, but I think that it is difficult because there are so many people who hear that word and stop listening to what you're saying. I am running on a platform that would help every single member of my district. I think that the government exists to help people, and the government exists to make sure that human beings are treated as human beings. Just very simple tests that somehow we keep failing. And there's actually been research done that shows that when you present ideas that are typically coded as progressive without assigning them to either party, there is actually broad support. The American People's Compact did studies, I hope I got that right, but they did studies that showed that 8 out of 10 Americans, regardless of party affiliation, agree with proposals like immigration reform that makes for a much clearer, easier path to lawful citizenship. And they support things like universal health care and all of these ideas that you're told you can't run on that, it's a swing district. Well, it's something that would help everyone. And Americans, like the people in this country, deserve to live in dignity. And it's hard to compare platforms because, again, Tom Suozzi has no policy whatsoever on his website. But what I can say is that if the things that I want to fight for were to be passed, even though New York 3 is one of the wealthiest congressional districts in the country, you know, there are people that are struggling, and you can be okay today and suffer an unexpected medical emergency or job loss, and suddenly you find yourself much less stable than you were even yesterday. Yeah. And by building an actual social safety net that equalizes opportunity and makes sure that nobody is dying a preventable death or struggling unnecessarily, the entire district would be better.
So in these last 20, 30 seconds, if voters can remember one message from you when they go to a vote on Tuesday, what would that be?
I am running for Congress because it is not enough to flip the House this year. We need to send people that actually want to help you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Danielle. I really appreciate it. If you want to really quick give your website, because I know you reference it a couple times for stats and accuracy.
Appreciate it. It is votewelch.com. That's WELCH, like the grape juice, sadly no relation.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Danielle Welch, running for the U.S. House of Representatives in New York's 3rd Congressional District. And we appreciate that in the upcoming election on Tuesday, June 23rd.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have me back anytime.
Thank you.